Hi, Carlos. So I'm going to take your two questions here. And again, another location of my house, just moving around one place to place. That's kind of how I read. Also, I just like move from place to place as I'm working so I don't get bored. Anyway, okay. So, Carlos, you're asking if my time as a social worker helped me understand children in the classroom a lot better, like behaviors that meant they were going through something at home. Okay, so yeah, my time as a social worker. So I spent 7 years, most of the time going into the jail and interviewing people about their lives and how they sort of trying to kind of trace the path of what led them to being incarcerated, and then recommended different kinds of therapy for them. And so during that time, I really learned how to ask questions and listen to stories. And I think there were lots of common factors in the people that I met who were in jail, and a lot of it had to do with neglect at home or abuse or early use or abuse of alcohol or drugs, and a lot of times just a lack of engagement with school and being ignored in many ways. So I'm very sensitive to the students who are quiet, the students who to reading body language, to noticing disengagement, and I'm pretty good at asking questions. But the other thing is, again, as I said in the other videos, that I really want students to have lots of opportunities to tell their story. And even if a student is always writing science fiction or fantasy, or always writing about something maybe distant and isn't really wanting to kind of get into a vulnerable space or a sensitive space, that says something to me too. It says that they prefer to be in this imaginary world, which may signal that there's something going on at home. And it may mean that they just aren't wanting to kind of grasp the daily realities of life. But there's a story behind why that's where they choose to spend their hearts and minds during the class period. So as obvious as someone who's yelling or out of their seat or talking back or um, maybe bullying another student, those are things that you can notice and point to, those kind of behaviors. I've sort of learned to look for less obvious things and try to ask questions about why that is. And the best source for those answers are the students. So asking them what's going on or asking them to write about something is always a good start. Your second question, Carlos, is if there's been an influential story or post in my blogs that's changed the way you instruct or teach a lesson. So the blog that I think has most impacted me and also had a great response, not a great, but a lot of responses, was the one about please apologize to me. I don't know if you had a chance to read that one. And it was a student who had said something to me during class that hurt my feelings. And I reacted in a way that hurt their feelings. And I that like resonated with stayed with me for a long time, and I needed to go find the student and apologize, and I needed to figure out where that came from. And in writing that piece, I realized that I had made some mistakes even just designing the lesson that day. I had made some mistakes in not being sensitive to the student. That resulted in me making a phone call home. I talked to the parent. I also talked to the student, and it really shifted our relationship entirely, in part by putting more power into the hands of the student because I positioned myself as the one who made the mistake. And so I had different responses from teachers about that post, but that really had influenced how I view my lesson, how I view my responses. Also, as someone who, I think Ryan asked about me having a PhD, it doesn't absolve you from making mistakes, and in fact I try to hold myself to a higher standard and acknowledge when I'm not right, and to be allow myself to be humbled by the students. So thanks for your questions, Carlos.